One. It's my first Saturday night in quarantine, so you know what that means. I'm going to teach you how to write your social problems paper for Introduction to Sociology Spring 2020. This paper that I'm about to show you and walk through with you is just an example. Your paper should be some amount longer. I expect your paper to be about 8 pages long and include at least 5 sources. I've included more than 5 sources, but I expect you to write more paper than what I've written. This is really just a sample. So I want you to notice a couple of things right away. I've just included a simple header on the first page of my paper telling my name, the date, and what class it's for. Please don't include like a big cover page, especially if you think that's going to count for like eating up pages in your page count. A simple header is fine. Also, don't try to take up half the page with it. All I need is your name, the date, and what class this is for. So the first thing you're going to write is an introduction to your paper. And I've written out my introduction section so you can see. Yours may be longer than this, but I've written out what I want the introduction section to do. So I'm writing on teen dating violence. And I want to say in my introduction section that what I'm writing about is a social problem and that what teen dating violence actually is. It's a type of intimate partner violence that affects teenagers in dating relationships. I've also included some information about the prevalence of the problem. So the most important part of my introduction section is the end of this first paragraph. What I've highlighted in blue here is a thesis statement. My thesis statement, now some people will call this a thesis sentence, but I actually want it to be more than one sentence. My thesis statement says what I'm going to argue in the rest of the paper. Notice that I don't start it by saying, in this paper I will discuss, or in this paper I will argue. I just say what I'm going to argue. Feminist theory provides a useful framework for understanding teen dating violence, since it explains how gendered power relations can impact relationships. Social learning theory is another framework which can help us understand teen dating violence, since it provides explanations for why dating violence occurs. This is going to be what my paper is about. How do I know that this is your thesis? Well, I know because it comes at the very end of your first paragraph of your paper. That's where I want it to show up. The next paragraph is some background information on teen dating violence. And I want you to notice that I include in my first paragraph and in every paragraph in-text citations. So when I state a fact, such as estimates of the frequency of teen dating violence vary from 12% to 20% of American teenagers, I provide in-text citations. These are just in-text references to the source where I found that information. So here I've included Giordano et al. 2010 and Maz et al. 2010. These are two different sources. And this expression here, et al., just means and others. You use et al. In an in-text citation whenever there are 3 or more authors. However, the first time that there are 3 authors for a piece, you list them all out. Here, I've had more than 3 authors of this piece, so I include et al. Even the first time I mention it. Here, I've done the same thing. Also notice that there's no comma between the author and the year. You just include the author and then the year. Another example is here. Here there were 3 authors of this piece, O'Keefe, Brockup, and Chu. So I simply included all 3 names. When I refer to this in the future, I'll write it as O'Keefe et al. 1986. But I have no page numbers and no punctuation between the authors and the year. An exception to this would be if I were making a direct quotation. So if I were quoting word for word what the article actually said, I would include 1986 colon page number. And that would actually just look like 34, right? So if I quoted them on page 34 of their article, I would just include their names, the year that the article was published, and then a colon and the page number. But I haven't included a direct quotation here, so there's no need to include page numbers. Teen dating, violence, and gender is my next section. This is a body paragraph. And in it, I'm going to discuss feminist theory. I'm going to discuss how gender affects teen dating violence. So I've done that here. Teenage girls are more likely than teenage boys to experience teen dating violence, and then I've included a source for that fact. Furthermore, girl victims are more likely to experience physical harm compared with boy victims, and I've included a source for that fact. Here's where I tie in theory. Feminist theory helps us understand gendered patterns of violence in teen dating relationships, and then I back up that argument. For example, Giordano and colleagues, 2010, argue that girls are more likely than boys to experience dating violence. Other studies show that relationships in which both partners express more traditional attitudes towards sex roles are more likely to include dating violence. Bookwala et al., 1992. This suggests that gender power imbalances may be, this is a typo, may be an important factor in teen dating violence. And then I've just included a placeholder. So here you could include another paragraph which deals with feminist theory. For example, you might talk about how boys are more likely than girls to experience verbal abuse, or boys are less likely than girls to report abuse. Other facts related to teen dating violence and how feminist theory helps us understand them. But these will all be paragraphs within this overarching section of teen dating violence and gender. Then your next section will deal with the other theory you've chosen to discuss. Here's social learning theory. And you'll just do the same thing you've done above. You'll include information about teen dating violence and explain how social learning theory helps us to understand that information. You may do this for several paragraphs. The next big section of your paper is the discussion section. In this section, which should be about a page long, you're going to discuss what's still unknown about your topic. So you might say, while estimates are pretty good for physical dating violence, we still don't know the prevalence of emotional and psychological abuse within teen dating relationships. You can also here discuss limitations of existing research. For example, you could say that teen dating violence specifically looks at high school students. The studies of teen dating violence have specifically looked at high school students, but we don't know much about middle school students. Or you could argue that we don't know enough about how men experience teen dating violence because men underreport intimate partner violence. So you also in this section should discuss potential actions that you think we as a society should take to combat teen dating violence. For example, perhaps you think we should educate teens about healthy relationship dynamics as part of sex education in school. Or perhaps you think that intervening in early patterns of family violence will help prevent teen dating violence from ever happening. Or maybe you think that the government should provide more resources for victims of teen dating violence. It can be anything, but you need to make a reasoned argument for what you think should be done about your problem. The shortest and easiest section to write is your conclusion. This is the last section of your paper, as the name suggests, and all you should do here is summarize what you've argued. It should mirror your thesis paragraph in that you should, again, state that the problem is important, state which theories you used to examine your problem, and then briefly summarize your discussion section in maybe one sentence. After you've finished writing your paper, these text sections are the only sections that count toward your page count. Your reference list does not count towards your page count, but you still have to include it. And here I've just included ASA style citations for all of my sources. So you can use this example as a template for making ASA citations. I've also linked an ASA style guide on Moodle, so you can see examples of how to create a reference list. But notice right away I've used hanging indent. So to do that, you want to select the text, go to paragraph, and here under indentation you see special, and you can select none, first line, or hanging. And you want to select hanging indentation. All this does is it leaves this first line sticking out and everything else indented under it. I want you also to notice that I don't include a URL or DOI number or anything else in my citation. My citation ends with, or my reference ends with the page range. So this is the last bit of information I include in any given reference, is the page numbers of the article. Also notice that my reference list is in alphabetical order. And if you were to look these references up, you'd see that they're relevant to my topic and that they are peer-reviewed scholarly journal articles. So this is what I want you to focus on, although it's okay to include some books and some, non-academic articles. In fact, I've made a mistake. I really should have included a reference for the CDC report that I used to find prevalence rates that were up to date. So what I should do here is right here I would have an ASA style citation for the CDC and then I would actually include a link to that report because there's not a publication that exists outside of the internet. So this is one exception where I actually would include a URL. Okay, I'm going to post this example on Moodle as well as this video of me narrating the example. Please email me if there are any questions about how to write your research paper.